Hello, everyone, and welcome to Top Secret. We have stepped one step forward from Virtual Pub. So it's all things about insider risk. So my name is Boaz Fischer, and we have
Sean Fear.
and our special guest, Dan Holman, who's the CEO of WordStack and CheckSocial. But before we get into it, why are we here, Dan? Sean?
So today we wanted to discuss a very interesting topic and quite common about the role of social media in our life and what's the impact for our workplace, especially in these days of the COVID.
Excellent. So let me introduce Dan Holman. Dan, just give me a little bit of background of who you are, the organizations that you work for, so we've got a sort of a good perspective and context.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Boaz. My name's Dan Holman. I'm the founder and CEO of WorldStack. We've also created a company called CheckSocial. So WorldStack was founded about 7 years ago. Its focus is on open source intelligence, which is in my case, a discipline of cybersecurity. So we build software solutions to help turn data from the web, social media, deep and dark web into actionable intelligence. So there's a variety of different business problems that we use that data to solve. And we've developed a tech platform called the WorldStack Engine, which essentially automates the collection and analytics and reporting of that data. So my background is in IT. So I started out as a techie doing desktop support. Went and did a degree in computer science, so did engineering for a while. I've done pretty much every job there is to do inside IT, from development, support, testing, delivery, project management, solution architecture, enterprise architecture. And for the last 10 years, I've been working in the cybersecurity space as a consultant, primarily in defense and national security. So I guess it was during my time there that I sort of run into a few of the problems that we solve now with WorldStack. So one of them is CheckSocial, and it's very related to the conversation we're going to have today.
Beautiful. Well, it looks like you've got a very wide and varied background there. So let's get into the meat of the thing. So we know that technology has become so much embedded into our daily lives. So I'm going to pose a question to you, Sean. What role does social media play today in the workplace?
So, if we look at in the traditional back days, people used to go to offices and they used to have their coffee breaks, lunch breaks. They used to talk between themselves, corridor conversations and coffee conversations. It was quite common, and also, some relaxing during the workday. Today, the social media made it more. It changed everything. People are not gossiping anymore near the cooler, and people are sitting on their desk and just open. They use their online chatting and different applications to communicate, whether it's with corporate applications or just using their phone. In fact, we are online 24/7 to our social media, different apps, and we are being users all the time. So it changed the way we communicate.
So why is it important? What is the benefit?
So look, people want to share feelings. They want to share moments. They want to talk. They want to share information. And the traditional approach was to pick up the phone, to call someone, to set an appointment, to find the right time, or chats in a boardroom. Today, we can set up a group and people can chat everywhere. People can share information instantly to their own peers. It's good and bad, as we are going to discuss further on. But it's not easy and simplify the communication between people for work and personal.
So from your own perspective, do you think it's changed the way companies are now looked at? I mean, would someone say, okay, I'm going to join your company? Would they say, what social media platforms have you got? that I can use?
I don't think they ask, but I think if I'm looking for a job and I'm talking to HR and I'm in a process of hiring, I'm sure and I know that today my social media will be checked. Look, it's very easy. Just Google my name and you can see all the profiles I have. And if everything is public, you can easily see my posts, my pictures, my likes, my feelings, my personal conversations. I can't hide anything. So organizations, they can easily learn about me.
Yeah, excellent. So then let me come to you. So it would be hard to find anyone that is employed that doesn't have a social media connection. But the question is, I read some figures that 50% of employees post during business hours. Is that a good practice? I mean, should that be allowed?
Well, that's an interesting question. I suppose that's a matter for each employer to decide. You know what their policy says about employee use of social media, and all organizations should have a social media policy and provide training to their staff about what is the expectation around their use of social media during business hours, but otherwise as well. So personally, from my point of view in my company, I don't mind. I don't mind when they use social media, as long as they're getting the work done, right? That's what's important.
Correct. So let me follow up with the next question. So what are the adverse effects of using social media in the workplace from your perspective? And I'll also pose that question to Sean.
Sure. So, look, I think that social media is a reality these days for all businesses. It's a necessary evil, is one way to look at it. It's used by businesses for sales and marketing functions. It's used for talent attraction. It's used for a variety of different functions now in business, and it's heavily entrenched and it's effective. So I mean, okay, so we have to have social media. Some organizations have chosen not to have it, but let's just say it's a necessary evil. So there are certain risks associated with social media, both from an employer point of view in how you communicate to your customers and to your partners, but also from an employee point of view in terms of what you're saying and how what you're saying can affect your employer. And
correct.
And hopefully we talk some more about that today.
Yeah, for sure. Sean, did you want to add anything?
I think, as Dan mentioned, it's a necessary evil because, and what happens today, employees, when they sit in their workplace, they basically open other tunnels of communication and information in and out to externals, and it's an easy bypass of the security controls in every organization. I could have the best firewall, but if I'm sending a document or a file intentionally or unintentionally via a secured WhatsApp conversation and it's distributed to all my peers, then I just bypassed all the thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of security measures that the company invested in. So it's important today, but also it's integrated with our life. It's an integrated part of us. So when we are in a workplace and I open another tab for example, LinkedIn, I can use LinkedIn for work. I can use LinkedIn to look for job. I can use WhatsApp for work and marketing. I can use WhatsApp to communicate with my wife, etc., etc. So it's mixed and it can be separated, and that's I guess that's the challenge today.
What about from a productivity point of view? Because I mean, the some organizations, they might be looking across their neighbor and saying, well, why is that person spending a lot of their time on Facebook? And there's a lot of that sort of raises a lot of, should they be fair? Should they be spending that much of time? Let's assume that that's not their role to go and do marketing through Facebook, but you'd find those conversations there.
And it's funny because access to social media today can be accessed either by my corporate computer that can be measured, and there are some metrics about, everything can be monitored and logged, but I could also use my personal supercomputer here and nobody can tell what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. And in most cases, we have the phone sitting next to us, and we communicate in parallel. We work in parallel, hence all the mistakes and human errors that we may do. We make phone calls for work. We switch to personal phone calls, and we use our phone. Sometimes we think because it's personal and ours and it will not be monitored, it's better to use that one for personal conversations or show some feelings, even at work. Personally, I remember when sitting in board meetings and sales meetings, I used to communicate with my colleagues sitting next to me using that about what we hear from our boss, right?
Yes, yes. So news travels fast. So look, social media is also, it's a good point that you raise, that you can start communicating in private. What about using it as a tool for harassment, bullying? That could also be quite detrimental within an organization.
Yeah, certainly. We've seen a customer whereby their employees were having an argument in public view on the company social media pages with full view of all their customers. You'd think this kind of behavior is crazy. Like, who does that? You can't imagine that happening, but it definitely happens. And as a result of that, now, so they check all of their employees when they hire them to say, okay, well, is this the kind of way they behave online? Is this something we want associated with our business? Do we want this person in our company? Because there is a risk there that there will be an incident, and then that incident, the fallout affects the employer.
Correct. So let me highlight two cases, and then I'll get your feedback. So the first one was in 2008, where 13 staff got sacked by Virgin Atlantic for making comments on Facebook. The second one, a Perth man got sacked for posting support for ISIS. So you don't have the full information. You don't know what the real context is. How do you see that? Is that a fair ground for sacking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not able to give legal advice, but what I would say is this: if you're going to discipline an employee over a social media incident, you want to have something that's objective and the rules have been set before the incident. So in this case, you need some kind of code of conduct or a social media policy, and the employees need to be aware of it and trained in it. It's one of these annual trainings along with other security training, so that everyone understands what's the expectation. And so then when there's an incident like this, it's much easier to refer back to that objective framework, which everyone agreed to, everyone said they're aware of, and it makes it very hard for them then to say, I didn't know, or this, any sort of excuses there. I think that's probably a key thing to have in place before something like this happens.
Sean, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important word, which means the context. I had many cases where I got something, I saw something on my Facebook, and I showed that to a friend of mine next to me, and he said, "Wow, I like it. Send it to me." And he literally shared it for him on my phone. Now it was recorded as my activity. Sometimes we want to share something and delete it because we don't believe in that, but we want to share it. And sometimes we have mistakes, so we don't have the full context. We don't know. It's like when someone is caught on speeding on the road, you don't know whether he was a driver or not, right? You just know that was the car. So as you said, Dan, we're not giving any legal advices, but I think the important thing here is to raise a flag, and then to look more, widely to see what other flags are flagging around that person. Are there any other red lights? So it's not something definite, but it can definitely give us some background or flag just to keep investigating.
Yeah, I think that's important to have the investigation aspect. It's risky to go off half-cocked with some partial information. It's important to look into the context, as you say, Sean, of why did they do this? What is the other things around why they did this? Because context is really important in terms of assessing employee behavior.
Yeah, but and I will add to that, and I think it's important, Boaz. On social media, if we look at corporate applications like emails and social media, on social media we feel more free, and I think we reveal our true character on social media because it's personal. So we have the liberty to express whatever we want, and we feel that we will never be judged by what we share, because we share it with the right groups, or we share it with friends that will not judge us, and we feel very free, and it's easy for us to expose or share or write our feelings, while we will not do that on emails. For example, when I communicate with friends that are also customers, I will never talk personal on emails. I will never share my feelings on emails, because I will assume it's monitored, and also it's a corporate IP infrastructure. I will use my WhatsApp or Skype to chat on personal things, even though it is a customer, for example.
Yeah. I was going to talk about behavior, because that leads me to something that, Sean, that you just mentioned. The behavior that is on social media, how does that relate to behavior that is in the workplace? So, for example, this is right down your alley there, Dan. So let's say an organization is looking to employ a person. They look at their Facebook of this specific person, and they're a big party animal. They're celebrating, they're drinking alcohol. It's just big party animal. How does the organization see that as a potential risk, if at all?
Yeah, look, so substance abuse is is a risk. And you're looking at that behavior that they're exhibiting on social media. And the question you're asking is this person going to be this way when they're working for me? What happens if this happens at a work event? What happens if this happens on work time? Is he going to come to work drunk? And so you start to ask these questions. There's a risk there. There are risks. And so what I would say is that, that's a red flag. That just a piece of information that you would then want to have a conversation with that person about, and say, if let's say you haven't hired them yet, you're considering hiring them, instead of summarily saying, oh no, I don't want anything to do with that person, because that's, going back to context. You get the data, at least then you can have the conversation and ask, and they might be like, oh, it just looks like it's that way because I like to post that. I have a good time, but when I'm at work, none of that business, and I've never had an incident related to that. And then what's happening here is a risk assessment. And then the employer can make a risk-based decision, an informed risk-based decision about, okay, all right, we're willing to give you a shot here. Let's see how you go. But you'd still be looking at it and just monitoring that, right? Because it's still a risk.
So Dan, what do you consider from your perspective as red flags? I mean, we can talk it from an insider risk. I understand what red flag is, a situation where a warning light has presented to you, and now the question is how you deal with it. But how do you see it from your own perspective?
Yeah, look, the Australian government's actually done a really good job of creating an objective framework on assessing suitability of a person. So it's called the Protective Security Policy Framework. And there's a part of that called PERSEC 12, which specifically relates to assessing suitability of personnel. Now, in this case, it's for security clearances, but you can easily lift it. It's character-based assessment. So have a look at that. There's some really good examples of what they call risk factors. And so some of those things are like, so you can roughly group into things like conduct. So with conduct, you've got things like foul language, discrimination, racism, criminal behavior, so things like fraud, abuse, violence, extreme views, We already talked about substance abuse, but also financial issues. So, do they do a lot of gambling? Is there like unexplained wealth? They have all these boats and cars, but they don't earn enough money to have those things. The influencers and associations also, like, so who do they associate with online? What do they talk about? What sort of groups are they in? Does that match up with someone that would be expected in this position? So for me, for example, a red flag could be, okay, I'm hiring a cybersecurity person, but there is no digital footprint. All right. So the lack of a digital footprint can also be a red flag. Like, what's going on here? Why is there no digital footprint? That's odd as well.
Yes, very good. So what is the legal framework for an organization to have the ability to fire a person for posting comments on social media?
And then I would just add to that question, do you refer to what you just said as profiling?
No, I don't think so, because I mean, we're not doing it from a law enforcement context. We're not looking at suspects and treating them like criminals. We're just trying to understand the character of the person, because the character of the person, which you can determine by looking at their online behavior, right, as a reflection of who is this person and how do they behave online. Because you're looking for having no experience with someone. Let's say you're in a position, you're hiring someone, perhaps even if you know them or you know someone and they were referred in, you still have never worked with them. And it's not until you work with someone that you start to get a sense for who they are. But what you don't want to do is get into that situation where you're working someone and it's too late. They're an employee and there's an incident because you didn't even look. You didn't know the risk was there. So no, I wouldn't say it's profiling. I'd say it's risk management.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, if I'll take it to the dating world, which is very, very similar. People are using Tinders today, the different apps, and people are chatting for the first time even before they saw each other. Sometimes you see pictures that are not theirs or fake pictures, etc. So people are investigating, and you say investigating and maybe assessing the risk. It is some kind of profiling. It doesn't need to be only for the law enforcement. Profiling means that I try to build a profile of a person to learn about that person as much as I can, to gather information, to look for information everywhere, and try to understand who I'm dealing with here before I even first meet him for the first time. So it's kind of profiling, not for the law enforcement, but for us to understand. Now, another thing, and maybe you can refer to that, people are removing posts and people are engineering their social media before they go to interviews and before they expose themselves to different processes.
Oh, definitely, yes. So we, I guess, with CheckSocial, one of the things that we do is we offer ability for individuals to check themselves ahead of a process like applying for a job, because you might have forgotten about the post, and if the employer is going to look, wouldn't it make sense for you to look yourself, understand what's there, and then do something about it before you apply for the process? I think that's it's the same as, like, before you go for a job, you look at your resume and you clean it up or remove that, tailor it, and you put your best foot forward. And it's what you do. Like, think about other similar scenarios. For example, you're going for a loan. Before you go for the loan, you'll typically really tidy up all your finances and you'll try to limit your spending for 3 months before you apply, because the financial institution is going to look at very closely at the last 3 months.
Correct. So coming back to the question I asked before there, Dan, what is the legal framework or their ability to fire someone on specific posts that they may deem as offensive? Or
yeah. So look, once again, I'm not providing legal advice here. And you should get legal advice on this topic if you're an employer, right? But so generally, when you look at precedent in law, and you look at the cases that have gone through Fair Work, particularly for unfair dismissal, if you look at those closely, you'll see there's the trend whereby an employer that's disciplined a staff member and fired them for a social media incident, where they had that code of conduct and that social media policy, and they provided training to the employee, then the decision was upheld. So it was an unfair dismissal. Whereas in the cases where we saw employers discipline an employee, and the employee made an unfair dismissal claim, and there wasn't those things in place, then generally the decision was overturned. So they said, oh, no, you'll have to return them to work, because they weren't made aware of the rules, the expectations that you had of them.
Right, good point. So you mentioned in the past, when we talked about that 20% of candidates have something online that could potentially put the organization at harm. Can you explain on that?
Yeah, look, it is a significant number, and anyone that has had experience with background screening would know that police checks have around about a 3 to 5% return rate in terms of an adverse finding from a police check. 20% is 4 times that, so that's significant. Right. That's 1 in 5 people will have something on social media that you should really be looking at and assessing the risk of. So it's quite significant, and so therefore, I guess the other aspect of that is a digital footprint check and looking at someone's online behavior. It's different to say a reference check or a police check, because those things they don't really consider the online behavior, right? So police check will only look at things that court cases where there's an outcome, and reference checks, well, you're going to get someone's opinion that has worked with them before, but are they likely to comment on the way that they behaved online? Maybe if there was an incident, they might mention it, but generally not.
Yep. Yeah. So you may have already answered, but I'll ask it again. So what is deemed as risky? Is that very much based on what each organization? Because what one organization may deem as risky behavior may not be risky for another.
That's right. That's right. It is specific to the organization, and going back to the code of conduct and the social media policy, those things are specific to the organization. Whilst you can start with a template or a starting boilerplate, you should tailor it to the organization. It's the same as in the hiring process. Each organization will have different things that and values, right? Each organization has a different set of values that they hold really close to their heart, and it's related to their mission of the company, etc. And so that becomes part of the assessment process, and it really needs to be reflected into the social media policy. Now, I guess that brings us into the discussion around discrimination and things like that, to do with can you decide you don't want to hire someone based on something you find on social media? I think Sean mentioned it earlier. Like, what if it's just something you don't agree with? I think the scenario was potentially smokers. I don't like smokers. I'm not going to hire a smoker. Can you do that if you find on social media that they're a smoker? Or I don't like people with tattoos. Can you do that? I don't like their political beliefs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. So the question then is, can an organization separate what is personal behavior and what is business behavior? Is that all comes down to the policies that they put forward to employees?
Yeah, so this comes down into, I guess, personal versus work, and my view, and from what I've seen play out over the last few years, is that line between personal and work is getting blurrier.
Correct.
And it's caused by things like people will invite their work colleagues into their social media network. So on Facebook, they'll invite their work colleagues into their personal networks. And then, as Sean was saying before, on your Facebook, your personal Facebook, you're going to be more of yourself because you're not worried about who sees, whatever. But you often will forget people that you work with or people you have worked with can see all of this as well.
Correct.
And sometimes some people even have their boss in their social media network, and that's really blurry at that point, because should the employer say or do something about something they see on the private profile, because they're now connected to their social media network under the context of colleague. as opposed to personal relationship. But it really comes down to the person themselves, the individual, really thinking about who are you having on your social media network, and then if you're going to have them on your network, how do you segregate so that you ensure that you're projecting what you need to project to those people, and you have your own personal views over here, and that really comes back to private security and privacy settings on each platform.
Yeah, Dan, how has the pandemic, the lockdowns that Sean is going through right now, the fact that people are now working more from home than face to face, how has that changed the equation from a point of risky behavior?
Look, I think what it's changed is it used to be we're humans. We want to connect, we want to collaborate, and trust is in a handshake. It's in seeing someone face to face in the same room. It's why we still go for coffees with each other, even though we could just have a chat on the on video chat or call someone. You still want to have that physical. You view someone and okay, I can trust this person. I shake my hand, I can trust this person. And there's no way really to get away from that. But COVID and remote work, that trend has really broken that. It's really broken that, and it's caused us to have to come up with innovative solutions for how do we replace that. And there's these things like video interview platforms in terms of the hiring process. We have these sorts of things, but it doesn't replace that assessment, that in-person assessment. And so you really need to think about, well, how can I get more data, more insights about this person if I can't meet them? What other tools do I have to be able to make an accurate assessment of this person and whether they'll be a good cultural fit for my organization?
Good stuff. Sean, did you want to add anything?
I think yeah, and I'll answer something very weird. It's my entire answer one will be on yes and no, true and false, because with the current situation of COVID, we lack of personal meetings, we lack of face to face, and we lack of understanding body language and see the entire picture. I can sit, well, I'm not saying that I'm doing, but I can sit right now with a nice shirt and tongs, and you will never see it. While with person to person, I need to come with the entire outfit. People can engineer their social media. Depends on the place they want to work. They can shut down their accounts. They can engineer it to make it more suitable for the right situation. With today's a situation where we are not in the offices, there is more involvement with work and social media. Managers and bosses can ask to be a part of your personal group, so they can interact with you more free. But it involves with a lot of risks. It brings a lot of problems, because if I accepted my boss a request to become a friend on my, let's say, LinkedIn or Facebook, and I want to block him now because I don't want to share a thing, I feel uncomfortable. And what happens when I unlink you from my group? What happens then? We know stories about people that committed suicide just because they were unfriends on Facebook or social media. People who used to get divorced or announce their divorce on social media. So it becomes very powerful, and because it doesn't have the personal touch, it makes it easy to express feelings, emotions, and act. So as you said, that it's quite mixed, quite integrated. It cannot be separated, and I think that's the new reality, for bad and for good. So if we come back to the first question, is it a fair ground for termination? I guess it's another part of it's another aspect of the character. It's another aspect of our life that we need to refer. It's not, we can't determine anything by that, but it can definitely provide us insights for understanding. That's my take.
Yes. So that brings me to the point. So what can employers do today to set up the right framework so that if they're in a position where one of their employees is doing, let's say, wrong by them or posting something that is completely against the corporate policy, what can they do? So what are the lessons that employers can actually take from listening or with what we've talked about?
Was it for me?
Both.
Okay, then I'll let you start.
Look, I think it's important to have a framework. So, as you said, Boaz, so thinking about this is now a risk that we have to manage, this digital reputation, and what employees are doing and how that might impact your organization. Having a clear framework and rules in place so that everyone understands, what their expectations are, but then having something that checks against that, compliance. So both at the beginning of the process, which is where we're focused a lot of the conversation today, but also ongoing. You don't just assess someone at the beginning. People change over time, so you should be assessing them, every so often, both in terms of providing the training and updating your policy to be in line with your organization's culture and values, but also assessing people to see if they're still a good fit for your organization.
Correct.
People have all sorts of events happen in their lives which changes them, like financial hardship, relationship problems, substance problems. These are things that are dynamic. They can change while they're employees of yours, and you should be assessing them on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're still aligning to your organization's values. And it's not about weeding out people that don't fit. It's about being aware of an emerging risk before it becomes a problem, and then helping the employee to manage that situation. Now, that comes down into what's the role of the employer, what's the role of the employee? Is this prying? Is this going too much into their personal lives? I think it can turn into that, but I think it's also, there is a duty of care that the employer has to the employee to make sure they're okay. But also to the employee to be transparent about things that might change their ability to work. I understand there's a conflict of interest there, right? The employee's not going to tell you about something potentially if there's going to be punitive repercussions, right? They're going to face consequences. So it's about both sides understanding that we're dealing with risks here, and both sides just want to have a good outcome. It's not about weeding people out or persecuting them.
Yep. Go ahead, Sean. Did you want to add something?
I think the social media activity is essential and a critical and very important data source. It's not the only one data source that should determine if yes or not, but organizations and employees should be attentive to what's happening there. It's a part of our life. Social media becomes really 24/7 extension to our thoughts, to our acts, and we, especially in this lockdown where we are locked in our houses, this is the only way we can communicate with our friends and families, and it's became more global and international today. So we are communicating with everybody. It makes it easy. It's a great data source, along with other data sources that can, that our behavior is comprised of. So if we want to learn about people, we are very involved and very active today in the social media. So I think organizations should be attentive to the activity there. And also people should be aware that it's not personal anymore. Once it's public to everybody. So we can be judged, and it can be seen, and we need to be aware of that fact that we're not watched only by our own peers, but by everybody. And mistakes that we do, or everything that we do, whether it's a mistake or a good thing, can definitely influence what people think about us. So this is how we are seen against the world.
Yeah. So Dan, I wanted to sort of ask final question to you. So how does CheckSocial, so it's more about what you do, how do you go about solving this challenge?
Yeah, so the idea for CheckSocial actually came to me. I was working in the security vetting industry, and as part of that process, there's traditional parts of that, like interviewing, collecting information about their financial position, understanding their travel history, who are they associated with. But something that wasn't covered very well was, looking at their online behavior as another indicator or proxy for how they might behave in the workplace. So I put, I guess my focus there was on trying to incorporate more of this type of data into the assessment process, as I felt there was a gap. Over the last couple of years, the government has put in place mandatory digital footprint checks for all those security clearances, and so that's created an issue, which is people that traditionally do security vetting or background screening, they don't have backgrounds in cybersecurity or like online research, the ability to find this information. So people like recruiters and people like background screening companies, they don't really have this specialism. So I saw there was a gap there as well, and so what we really needed was you could solve it with humans, I suppose. You could train these people how to do it, but it's still going to take a lot of time. There's still like a high error rate, so you have to read through all these posts. You have to figure out, is this the right person that I'm searching and finding? And you have bias. Each person looking at this information would have their own implicit bias when they're looking at it. So I thought the way to tackle this problem is with technology. So we built a platform called CheckSocial, which essentially it automates the collection and analysis of data relating to an individual or company's digital footprint. So a digital footprint, behaviors and activities online, so things like the web, forums, blogs, social media, etc. And what you post on there, what people post about you, is all included in your digital footprint. So I guess CheckSocial was created to solve this problem, and it solved it in a government context. But what we're doing now is we're taking the CheckSocial platform and we're bringing it into the private sector. So we want to introduce it into the recruiting process. So we've already had some companies and recruitment companies adopt a digital footprint check to deal with this reputation risk that we've been talking about today. So it sort of fits in at about the same step in the process as, say, we would do a reference check or a police check. So you would have a short list of candidates, and you want to just look at their online behavior as a way of assessing that digital reputation risk before you make the final offer and sign the employment contract. So and we're finding a lot of traction in that industry.
Excellent. So then, for those who are watching the video and will be watching in the future, how do they get in contact with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so sure. So head to our website, which is checksocial.io, or you can just get in touch with me on LinkedIn.
All right, and I'll have also the information right down below. Is there a question that I should have asked you, but I haven't?
Look, I think you go, Sean.
That's my last question. I think you referred a lot to the pre-hiring process, so to check the social behavior pre-hiring. What about the ongoing? Is that something that organizations are asking? What is to learn about the ongoing behavior?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. So definitely it is. So and once again, it's really being, in this case, driven from the government side. So as part of that security vetting process, you get a security clearance, right? There's an assessment at the beginning, and then typically they will assess the clearance according to the level, but let's say every 5 years. And I talked about earlier, there's a lot that can happen in 5 years. And so right now, the security aftercare process relies on self-reporting. What does that mean? That means that each security clearance holder has to, if something changes, tell the organization that manages their clearance. You can understand there's a bit of a conflict of interest there. You could report information that makes you lose your clearance, which then affects your ability to work. So what's needed there is some kind of objective assessment that can be ongoing in the period between you had your last check and the next check. So So this concept is known as continuous evaluation, and what it is it's looking at significant life events in someone's life. So they get married, they go overseas, they go traveling, they connect to new people, they acquire new assets, they post things online. All of these events can be an indicator. So if you have a solution in place, which CheckSocial does, where you can check someone initially and then continue to monitor them over time. So you're looking at these events, and then that way you can assess the risk. Does this event that's happened here pose a risk to the organization? And that provides a data point which you can then have a conversation. If you don't have that data point, you can't have the conversation, and there's a risk here that you're going to have an incident eventually.
Yeah. And obviously during your assessments, you're looking at the time of the post, the ratio, the locations, so it can indicate. So that can give another indication, not necessarily for bad behavior, but for suspicious or risky behavior, as well as lost, stolen identities and phishing, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Good stuff. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having a chat with you, Dan and Sean. Yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch, and we'll probably do another one like this in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely.